Okay, great. I'm going to talk about continuous delivery and product management. Before I do that, I'm going to introduce myself. In case you can't see me here, I thought I'd put a picture up here as well. My name is Susie Prince. I work for a company called ThoughtWorks. We are primarily a software consultancy. We build software for other businesses, but we also have a product division, and that is where I spend my time. We build products for other software development teams, engineering teams, DevOps teams. I've spent most of my career either in the consulting part of our business or in our product business, building B2B solutions for other companies. And for the last 4 or 5 years, I've spent the most of my time building continuous delivery tools. We build an on-premise open source product, which has a commercial aspect to it, which I spend a bunch of my time on, and we also had a SaaS product as well. So I've spent a lot of time with teams who are on their continuous delivery journey. Either they are just thinking about what is this term continuous delivery, what does this mean, or they're teams that are deploying software to production, to the hands of their users multiple times a day. And so I want to talk about my experiences with those teams and how you, as product managers, founders maybe, even investors, should really care about continuous delivery and why it's not just a practice for your tech teams. So I'm going to start off with a definition of continuous delivery. Before I do that, I'd like to know how many people have even heard of this term in this room. Okay, so I'm going to say maybe more than half. I will do a quick introduction to it, and I'll highlight the things that I think are particularly important for people who are not technical people. So this is my favorite definition of continuous delivery. I'm going to read it out to you. Continuous delivery is the ability to get all changes, or changes of all types, including new features, configuration changes, bug fixes, and experiments into production or the hands of your users safely, quickly, and in a sustainable way. It's kind of a mouthful, so I like to shorten it to these highlighted pieces, basically all changes into the hands of users safely, quickly, and sustainably. And the 3 things I want to call out, and you'll hear me repeat in this talk, are the safely, quickly, and sustainably, why those things are important and why they're particularly important if you're a product manager. What it looks like in practice, continuous delivery is basically a bunch of feedback loops. The first feedback loop, just not sure if this part works, is this part here. We call that continuous integration. That's basically where code from your developers' machines is integrated with the rest of your existing code base, and it's tested to make sure it still works. And then following on from that, we have a bunch of other feedback cycles, which are part of this thing that we call a deployment pipeline. And basically, every time your code progresses down this pipeline, different stages of the pipeline, you get more confidence about whether that code is going to perform correctly and as you expect in production. And this is particularly important if you're a product manager. You want to know that what you're about to give to your users is going to work successfully. And so a deployment pipeline, and the part of continuous delivery that I really like, is this reassurance of the quality as you move through that pipeline. One thing that is particularly important, and I think is key for some product managers and perhaps their distaste for things like continuous delivery, is the distinction between continuous delivery and continuous deployment. And that really is this bottom part here, the difference between a manual deployment to production and an automatic deployment to production. In continuous delivery, it is a manual deployment to production, and what that means is that somebody, and I hope it's a product manager, that's what I advocate, and I empower you all to ask for that if it's not the case in your organization, decides this software is ready for our users, it's ready for production, I'm going to press the button to do that. In the automated world, that means you're automatically confident that once you pass through all of these stages, you're going to put your software into production. And either can work, depending on your organization. Either way, it's a business decision. I believe that continuous delivery is about empowering businesses. And so whether you decide to advocate for a manual deployment, and then you get to decide when it goes, or automatic, you should be deciding whether that's happening or not. And there's two other things that I really want to call out about continuous delivery that really are important about this definition of it. And the first I mentioned already is that once you've passed through this deployment pipeline, you should feel very confident that your code is going to be safe in production, that it has a high quality. So if you have a robust, successful delivery pipeline, you should feel very confident about deploying to production. And the second thing is, you don't have to do continuous deployment. You don't have to do an automatic delivery to your production environment if that's not what works for you. And you get all the benefits of continuous delivery, even if you don't do continuous deployment. So enough of all the boring tech stuff. Who cares about deployment pipelines, test cases, staging environments, performance environments? Surely this is basically not something that you, product manager people, should care about. You've got CTOs, you've got tech leads, you've got QAs, maybe delivery managers, engineering managers, all these people, like, they're going to handle it, right? You have way too many other things to care about. This is where I tell you that basically I think you do have to care about this. And the reason is, it's your job to put successful software and value into the hands of your users. And the way that that happens is your software development process, and part of that is continuous delivery. So if you have the most amazing idea, you have 100 bazillion hypotheses that you want to test, you have this thing that you've been working on for ages, if you can't get it to your users and get some feedback on it, if you can't A/B test it, if you can't ask them for their opinion, it's kind of, and if they can't use it and build on it and build their businesses, it's kind of useless. So that is why I think you should care. And there are 5 reasons why you should care about product management. I'm going to call them superpowers, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So the first superpower is that continuous delivery can transform your organization. And we have evidence to show that continuous delivery actually provides a competitive advantage to the organizations that use continuous delivery. I'm going to draw a lot of the statistics that you see. There will be a bunch of quotes that I show. Most of them are drawn from this book, which is called Accelerate. The primary author is a lady called Nicole Forsgren. She also wrote it with a former colleague of mine, Jess Humble, and it basically has a whole bunch of statistical, peer-reviewed evidence around software delivery processes and why they're important. I highly encourage you to read it. If not, you can just stay for the next 10 or 15 minutes and I'll show you the most important pieces that I think are relevant to us. So, in Nicole, in the book, let me go back, sorry. In this book, one of the most important things that Nicole does is that she defines what a high-performance software delivery team is. And that's a team that has these characteristics. So a high-performing software delivery team is able to make multiple deployments a day, on demand when required. The lead time for those changes, so when the change was first started to when it actually gets to production, is less than an hour. The time that when it goes to production, the percentage chance that that will fail or cause a problem for you is less than 15%, which maybe is actually not that great when you think about it, but it's better than the low performers. And the mean time to recover if there is a failure is also less than an hour. So this is what we're striving for if we want to be a high-performance delivery team. And once she has defined this high-performance delivery team, she shows us what it means to businesses that have those kind of characteristics. And she shows us that high-performing delivery teams practice continuous delivery, and by practicing continuous delivery, they are highly performant. And that actually leads to organizational performance. So whenever you see an arrow like this on some of my diagrams and also in the book, it basically means that this drives this, drives this. So continuous delivery drives your software delivery performance, which drives your organizational performance. And that's a little hard to understand. So a good way to think about that is she says that high-performing organizations are twice as likely to succeed and exceed their performance goals for profitability, productivity, market share, and the number of customers. So what we're basically saying is, if you practice continuous delivery, you have a higher performing software development team, and you're twice as likely to have twice as many profits and twice as many users. She also showed that those high performers, the ones practicing continuous delivery, have a 50% higher market capitalization and growth. And that's also a little hard to understand. So I have taken the liberty to show you something about roughly what that means. And there are liberties here. This is not from the book, but this is a chart of the growth of Amazon, Google, and Netflix over the period of time which Nicole studied. And I think we're all familiar that these organizations practice continuous delivery. And you can see their growth versus the S&P 500. And you can see that they obviously have significant growth. Now, there's a bunch of different things happening in those organizations, but essentially what Nicole is saying is that there is a relationship between software delivery performance and organizational goals. Continuous delivery is part of that, and this is something that you can achieve if you want to. So I think, if you want to be a superhero, I'm basically saying continuous delivery has to be part of that toolkit. But it's not just all about technical practices. I want to talk about how continuous delivery actually lets you be a better product manager. And it will actually help you slay this thing called the feature factory and help you move towards being a lean product manager. I'm sure you're all informed about the most current thinking in product management. You know about lean startup, customer development, the idea of outcomes over outputs, and the notion that we don't want to be working in a feature factory. And these things are very common in our vocabulary as product managers. And all of these things are focused on the idea that you can't simply just put feature through your software delivery process and end up with value. They're based on the idea that you have experimentation, frequently delivered value in small batches, and that you seek customer feedback. And I am speaking to product managers, you will know this, except for, and I think Patrick said this earlier in his talk as well, people aren't actually doing these practices, and we'll talk about that more. So we know for sure that lean product development actually drives better outcomes for your organization. And again, this is statistically proven in Nicole's book. We also know, though, that a significant number of organizations and product management professionals are not actually seeking feedback from the market. This is a survey that was on Mind the Product. 62% of B2B product managers admitted that they were prioritizing features without any feedback from the market. And I think that's fairly shocking. It's quite a sobering fact that 2/3 of us might just be winging it every day, even though we've all been at these conferences and we've all heard, do experimentation, talk to your customers, get feedback, follow the loops, and none of us are doing it. And that's kind of shocking to me, and I sort of was thinking, well, why is this? And I think, frankly, a lot of the time, product managers want to do these things, but they are stuck in organizations that cannot allow them to do it. Often we're working with a delivery capability that accepts features in at a certain cadence of time. We have a 2-week sprint. We sit in our 2-week sprint. We wait till the end of the sprint. We deliver our stuff. It goes to the release train. We wait for the release train to go out. And so we really can't. We're sort of stuck in this organization that just can't let us get to the lean product management that we want. It wastes our time waiting for feedback, and it actually often wastes work. You have to fill the sprint, so why not just do an extra few things instead of, getting feedback on the first thing that was completed. And again, it's not just me that thinks that. Dr. Forsgren's work has actually shown that if you take an experimental approach to product development, it's actually highly correlated with your ability to have those technical practices that contribute to continuous delivery. And I basically take that as proof that to get that kind of real rubber hits the road feedback, you need to be working in an organization that can allow you to do that. So what's next? Why is continuous delivery, another of our superpowers? The next thing that I think is particularly important about continuous delivery is that it allows us to have a software delivery process that is safe and predictable. And in a world where your customer needs are changing, the market influences are dynamic, who knows what your bosses and your business is going to ask for, knowing that your continuous delivery, software delivery process is going to be fairly predictable is actually quite a nice feeling, that you're not scrambling to do things. And one of the benefits, the upsides of that, is when you have some predictability, you can actually use that to predict your future performance. So if you know that you regularly deploy to production in under an hour, which is what our high performers did, you can actually know that if you want to get a bug fix to production, you can tell your customer it's going to be there in an hour. And that's quite an amazing feeling as a product manager, to actually be able to say that, be really ready to answer those questions. But it's more than just a peace of mind. It's that you can actually genuinely be responsive. So it's not just that I can say it's going to be there in an hour. It's that it's actually going to be there in an hour, and that you can believe what you're saying. If you think back to your last customer conversation, particularly if it wasn't driven by yourself, if it was driven by you, I'm sure it would be all about feedback and understanding. But if it was driven by the customer, or perhaps your sales team, maybe even your support team, it almost certainly evolved around them wanting something from you that wasn't available. A capability, a feature, a bug fix. And it almost certainly revolved around them saying, so when can I have it though? Like, when are we going to get this? And in a pre-continuous delivery world, often you would have to have that response where, I'm not sure, maybe tomorrow, we could rush it for you, but it might break some other things. It's this horrible, weird conversation. But in the world where you have continuous delivery, you have predictability, you can be responsive. You might even be able to say, actually, we've just pushed that to production. Shall we take a look at it together? Those are the kind of things that this software delivery excellence really brings you. So those things, those three superpowers that I talked about, transforming your organization and being more responsive and being safer in your software delivery process, those are all sort of really technical things. But I want to talk about now about actually what continuous delivery can do for your culture. And it's actually been shown that those organizations that practice continuous delivery actually have better organizational cultures. And I think that's because when you get these practices right, when you get continuous delivery right, you actually have to work together. You actually have to collaborate. You actually have to break down silos. You have to share goals. You have common goals. And you genuinely act as a team. And when you're having a conversation about, shall we deploy today, and you as a product manager are involved in that conversation, you're more likely to be talking about the quality of your software as a team together. You're more likely to be talking about what is value for your customers, because you're saying, actually, I don't want to put this out there because it's not complete yet, or it's not ready yet, or it's not what I envisioned. I don't want to do that. And your team actually understands those decisions. So the more your team centers around these fundamental qualities of your software, the better that your software is likely to be. And when your team members are not siloed, when they understand each other, they understand each other's work, and you actually have these benefits of actually working in this way. And that's all warm, and it's all fuzzy, and it's all my opinion, but luckily, they actually proved, again, in this book, I urge you to read it and understand the science behind what they did. They actually found that those teams who practiced continuous delivery actually had a more generative, that's sort of an idea-based culture, and they were more performance-orientated. And that's actually a big thing to say. I think most of us would think it was the other way around. You get some great people, they do some good work, and we have a great culture, and our product is great. But actually, if you take the work to put time in, you do the work to build a continuous delivery practice, it actually affects how your whole organization works. And I think that's actually something that's really important for us to understand. And so the final thing is that actually continuous delivery means that you don't really need to be heroic all the time. It can be super powerful for you, but you don't actually need to be this amazing, super-powered product manager. And I'll explain that to you by going back to our definition of continuous delivery. I've talked to you about the safely part, and the quickly part is basically it's in the definition, continuously delivering, so it is about being responsive and quick. But I haven't yet talked about the sustainable part. And honestly, continuous delivery actually makes software releases pretty boring. There's no rush to get something out. There's no all-nighter before something goes out to production. You may just be toggling on a little button in an interface. There goes my software into production. You may just be pressing something somewhere and saying, let it go out to the world. We've had it go out to these 10 people. Now we're going to have it go out to these thousands of people. And it really is kind of a killer for some people. They love the adrenaline of a software release. The little anecdote that I have is that one of my teams actually complained to me that we just don't have these celebrations anymore when we do releases. It's like we haven't been to the pub together. We haven't nearly died on a Sunday night but made it to the office on a Monday morning, and you go, donuts for everyone, because we're just, we're releasing every day. We used to boringly walk over to a whiteboard, talk about what was ready for production and make a decision, and it can seem very mundane. But what it actually means for you is that all those superhero, exciting things you get to do, you actually get to do with your customers, your business, your founders. What is it that you're trying to achieve? Why does your customer hate the thing that went out last week? You actually get to spend your superpoweriness, I didn't know how to say that, but you get to spend that energy on product management rather than software delivery releases. And I think that is actually very powerful for us. So there we have it, 5 superpowers. But what's next? I spent most of the time talking about theory. I told you to read this kind of full-on book about why all these things work out, and basically the answer is do CD. But what can you really do tomorrow if you wanted to get started with this process? I have 5 bonus quick things that I suggest. The first is, if you don't already understand how your ideas, your amazing ideas, go through this process and get to the hands of your users, do that. Go talk to the people that do your continuous delivery process if you do it now. Talk to your DevOps teams, talk to your software engineers. You need to know what is happening between this point and this point. And if you're not already doing this, don't send them a massive PDF of all your requirements. Even if you are walking over to somebody's desk, think about the smallest possible thing that you can. That will make that process a lot easier for you. The third thing is that once you understand this process and you're putting little things into the process, measure how long it takes to get from one end to the other. I guarantee you it won't be less than an hour, which is what our high performers were doing. And if it is, kudos. I'm sure you don't have a 15% failure rate. Most people are not in this high-performing range, and to get the most benefits, you need to be. So measure it and see what you're doing. And then the fourth thing, it's this soft, fuzzy thing, but really think about how that process is changing your organization and build trust among teams. And then the last one is, I think a lot of product managers take it upon themselves, and I've just told you to take on another thing. Think about continuous delivery as well as all the other things, but really think about when you get through this process, it's actually a less work for you, and it's going to be a much more sane, safe environment. I actually really enjoy the teams that I work on. They're the same people that I used to work with before we evolved to this, and it actually, it's a much more enjoyable environment. We don't spend as much time, like I said, at the weekends together, but it actually becomes more joyful, and you don't need to be this sort of superhero that I talked about. Thank you. There was a thanks. Oh, I have some reading, the book, and then, thanks. I can answer some questions if anybody has any. Yeah. Yes. So I think it depends what you're trying to achieve by putting it out there. So that's probably the main thing to think about. Like, what is my goal with putting this out into production now? Often it's a fully baked feature. You know, it might have been something you've been working on for a while. Maybe you've put some thin slices out before and you know it's ready to go. So in those cases, you might not want to put it out on a random Tuesday. You might actually want to do it with, you know, like a PR event or something like that. Or it might just be a micro little fix that you have, or a hypothesis that you're testing. So it's really about what am I trying to achieve by putting it there? And if it's something that doesn't require ceremony, then maybe it can just go out. And maybe you hold it for other reasons. So that would be my advice, is like, what are you trying to achieve by putting that thing there? I think it varies quite a lot. In the organizations that I've worked with, I often see that product managers make that decision. In the actual team that I work with now, we actually have 3 people help make that decision. A product marketer will definitely make that decision with the product manager. And we also have our support team actually quite often involved in that discussion, because if it is something that we're fixing, let's say, that's broken, they have the most context around the implication of putting that fix out at a certain time. In terms of the severity, I am assuming people do that, but I've not come across it in terms of feature development in the way that I'm describing. The other thing that people often ask me is, well, does this mean I can only work on one thing at a time? Like, if everything that I do goes straight through this pipeline into production, does it mean that I can't have multiple things, multiple features on the go at a certain point in time? And that's something that I would say that's not the case. It's not just about one thing takes all. You can actually achieve multiple different streams of work by either using something like a feature flag, feature toggles, branching, those kind of things, and not just have one stream of work. It doesn't mean everyone has to do the same thing. You can actually turn things on and off, and Edith can talk to you about that, I think. Or your tech teams will know about feature flags, or they'll have the way they prefer to do it. I think somebody else had their hand up. Yes.
I have a question on the execution side of continuous delivery.
Yes.
How do you shorten the dev and QA cycles to make scaling happen?
Yes. So my picture's not going to help, because it doesn't tell you the answer to that. But basically, without getting into too much of the nitty-gritty, a lot of the continuous delivery practices on the technical side are around having automation. So a lot of the things that once would have been done manually by a QA have to be automated. And that is all built around automated test suites. So in all of the organizations that I have worked with, we would recommend having multiple different levels of test automation, starting with unit testing, and then you would have more like feature level testing. So it's about test suites, and then it's about automating those test suites. And often we are running many, many different tests in parallel at the same time. In fact, many thousands and thousands of tests all running in parallel, so that you get those quick, short delivery times. Because if you think about someone like Google putting something out in under an hour, they would have, maybe even millions of test suites. So that's what I would say to shorten those cycles, automate your process, and the biggest way of doing that is having automated testing suites. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Any other questions? I think you're up.